Welcome to the shadow of the idea, the place where deep thoughts come to life. Today, we're diving into the genius of Fyodor Dostoevsky and how his wisdom on suffering shapes our understanding of life itself. If you feel the spark of curiosity, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with someone who needs to hear this. Every like, every subscription helps grow this community of curious minds. Thanks for being part of this journey. Let's dive in. One, suffering as a path to redemption. Have you ever thought about suffering not as something to escape, but as a door to something greater? Fyodor Dostoevsky certainly did. He saw suffering as much more than just pain or hardship. It was a profound path to redemption. Imagine it. When you're caught in a moment of deep anguish, when everything around you seems to be crumbling, it's easy to think of suffering as a force that's simply here to break you. But Dostoevsky had a different perspective. He believed suffering could heal. Yes, heal, even when it feels impossible. In his works, Dostoevsky explored the idea that suffering isn't just about enduring. It's about transformation. It's in those moments, those raw, painful experiences, that we're given the chance to truly grow, to evolve. Suffering challenges us, it pushes us past our limits, and forces us to confront the deepest parts of ourselves. It's uncomfortable, maybe even terrifying. But what if that very discomfort is the beginning of something powerful? What if, through our pain, we discover strength, compassion, and a deeper understanding of our place in the world? Dostoevsky's characters often face unimaginable pain. Take Crime and Punishment, for example. Raskolnikov, he's a man who commits a terrible crime, all while grappling with feelings of guilt, alienation, and inner torment. But as his suffering intensifies, something incredible happens. He starts to confront the very essence of who he is, and it's through that suffering, through that internal battle, that he begins to find his path to redemption. It's not easy, it's not instant, but it's real. Dostoevsky believed that suffering strips us down to our core, revealing who we truly are beneath all the masks we wear. And while that revelation can be uncomfortable, it's also liberating. It's only by facing our deepest pain, by walking through the darkness, that we can hope to come out the other side stronger and more whole. You see, suffering brings us face to face with the rawness of life, the brokenness, the messiness. But there's beauty in that, isn't there? In knowing that even in our darkest moments, we're still capable of growth, of redemption. It's like a seed planted in the soil. It has to break through the earth, push through the dirt, before it can reach the sunlight. And just like that seed, we too must go through the storm of suffering to emerge into something greater than we ever thought possible. Now, let's be clear. This isn't to say that suffering is easy, or that we should seek it out. Life, as Dostoevsky knew, is full of its own trials. The point is, suffering can be a tool, a guide, to help us evolve. If we embrace it, not run from it, then we open ourselves up to the possibility of true change, real redemption. And let's be honest, who of us hasn't faced suffering in some form? Whether it's the pain of loss, failure, loneliness, or fear, we all encounter moments that challenge us in ways we never thought we could handle. But Dostoevsky invites us to see these moments through a different lens. Instead of viewing them as obstacles, he urges us to view them as opportunities. Opportunities to change, to grow, and to connect with something deeper than ourselves. So, when life gets tough, and it will, remember this. You are not defined by your suffering, but by how you choose to respond to it. Will you let it defeat you? Or will you use it as a stepping stone, a path to redemption? Because, as Dostoevsky shows us, it's through the deepest suffering that we can reach the highest form of redemption. The key is in the transformation. The key is in how we choose to rise. And remember, it's not about avoiding the storm. It's about learning to dance in the rain. Through the suffering, you can emerge stronger, more compassionate, more alive. Two personal struggles shaping his genius. Imagine for a moment, your life stripped of comfort, your freedom taken away, and your every plan, every dream, shattered in an instant. How would you react? What would that do to you? Fyodor Dostoevsky didn't have to imagine. His life was shaped by personal struggles that were as real as they were painful. But here's the thing. Those struggles didn't break him. They made him. They shaped his genius in ways most of us can't even begin to comprehend. Dostoevsky's personal journey is nothing short of remarkable. He wasn't born into wealth, nor did he live a life free from hardship. In fact, it was his suffering that became the very foundation of his literary genius. You see, Dostoevsky's story isn't just about writing books. It's about surviving, growing, and finding meaning in the midst of unimaginable pain. One of the most significant chapters in his life was his time in a Siberian labor camp. Imagine being sentenced to hard labor, confined to a remote, freezing wasteland, surrounded by nothing but harsh conditions and a constant battle for survival. Dostoevsky was only 28 years old when he was sent to Siberia, after being accused of conspiracy and sentenced to death. But just as the firing squad was about to take his life, a last-minute reprieve came through. He was sent to the labor camp instead. And this is where the real story begins. Siberia wasn't just a physical punishment. It was a psychological and spiritual trial. Forced to endure unimaginable suffering, Dostoevsky experienced a transformation unlike any other. It was in that dark, desolate place that he truly came face to face with the human condition. In those years, he was forced to confront his own limitations, his fears, his anger, and, ultimately, his soul. His time in Siberia, despite the unbearable conditions, became the fertile soil from which his greatest works would grow. But it wasn't just the labor camp. Dostoevsky faced financial ruin, the loss of loved ones, and even physical illness. He struggled with gambling addiction, which led to even more debt and despair. Through it all, he never gave up. Each setback, each hardship, became a stepping stone, a lesson, if you will, that would later inform his writing. It's fascinating to think about how personal suffering can translate into artistic brilliance. For Dostoevsky, every hardship became material, raw, unfiltered experiences that would allow him to create characters like Raskolnikov, Ivan Karamazov, and the suffering Christ-like figures who populate his work. These characters were not just figments of his imagination. They were reflections of his own inner turmoil, his grappling with life's most profound questions. When we read Dostoevsky's work, we're not just engaging with the story. We're encountering the heart of a man who lived through the very struggles he wrote about. His characters, flawed, tortured, deeply human, embody the complexities of his own psyche. Dostoevsky was never afraid to show the darkest parts of human nature, the parts most of us try to hide. And he did this because he had lived it. He had felt it. But here's the beauty of it all. Through his struggles, Dostoevsky discovered something essential about the human spirit. He discovered that suffering, while painful, can lead to insight. It can lead to wisdom. Through his own personal trials, he learned how to use his pain as a tool, not just for understanding himself, but for understanding the world around him. Dostoevsky's genius wasn't just born out of intellectual ability or literary talent. It was born out of his ability to feel, to experience life at its most extreme, and to process that experience in a way that connected with the hearts and minds of his readers. He wrote not just with his mind, but with his soul. And that's what made him so extraordinary. So, when we look at his works, we're not just seeing the product of a gifted writer. We're seeing the evolution of a man who was broken, rebuilt, and transformed by his own personal struggles. His suffering became the very foundation of his genius. In a way, Dostoevsky's life story is a reminder for all of us. Struggles, challenges, pain, they're a part of the human experience. But it's how we respond to them, how we choose to grow from them, that makes all the difference. Dostoevsky didn't let his struggles define him. Instead, he used them to define the very essence of human nature. And, in doing so, he left a legacy of profound insights that continue to inspire us today. 3. Suffering as a mirror to society. Have you ever thought of suffering as a mirror? Not just something personal, but something that reflects the larger world around us? Fyodor Dostoevsky certainly did. For him, suffering wasn't just an individual experience. It was a lens through which society's deepest flaws were revealed. And that's exactly what makes his work so powerful. They don't just look at personal anguish, they look at society itself, showing us what's broken and what needs healing. Dostoevsky had a unique ability to use suffering as a tool to expose the hidden truths about human nature and the world we live in. His characters are often placed in situations of intense emotional turmoil, forcing them to confront not only their own flaws, but the moral decay and contradictions of the society around them. And through that suffering, Dostoevsky invites us to look into the mirror and see not just these characters, but ourselves. Take the brothers Karamazov, for example. The Karamazov family, with its complex web of moral struggles and personal betrayals, is a microcosm of society. Each brother represents a different aspect of humanity: faith, doubt, reason, passion. And through their suffering, Dostoevsky highlights the tensions within Russian society at the time. But it's not just about Russia. What makes the novel timeless is how it taps into universal themes. We see in the Karamazovs the same questions, the same contradictions that we face today. How do we reconcile faith and doubt? How do we find meaning in a world that often seems chaotic and unjust? But it's not just the characters' internal battles that Dostoevsky explores. It's how their suffering is shaped by the society they live in. His works show us that suffering isn't always something that happens in a vacuum. Often, it's the direct result of the systems we've created. The oppressive structures, the inequalities, the moral blindness. These are all forces that can contribute to individual suffering. In Notes from Underground, Dostoevsky gives us one of his most chilling and insightful characters, a man who is trapped in his own bitterness and self-loathing. This man isn't just suffering for personal reasons. He's also a product of a society that has, in many ways, dehumanized him. He is disconnected, alienated, and deeply cynical. And through his suffering, Dostoevsky reflects the emotional and spiritual crises of the time. The character's pain is a direct commentary on the cold, rational, and often heartless world around him. It's here that Dostoevsky's brilliance truly shines. He doesn't just show suffering in the context of personal tragedy. He reveals how that suffering is intertwined with the very fabric of society. He asks us to look at the ways our collective choices, values, and systems contribute to the pain we experience as individuals. And in doing so, he challenges us to rethink our role in shaping a more compassionate world. Suffering, for Dostoevsky, is not just something to be endured. It's something to be understood. It's a mirror, reflecting the flaws in our society. When we look into that mirror, we see not just the brokenness of individuals, but the brokenness of the world we've created. This is where Dostoevsky's work becomes so relevant today. His insight into human suffering forces us to confront uncomfortable truths, not just about ourselves, but about the world we live in. In a way, Dostoevsky's works invite us to reflect on the deeper questions we often avoid. How do our actions, as individuals and as a society, shape the suffering of others? Are we contributing to the pain of the world, or are we working toward a more just, compassionate existence? His characters, through their own suffering, force us to examine these questions, because the suffering they experience is a direct consequence of the world they live in. This is why Dostoevsky's works are so timeless. They don't just tell us about suffering. They show us how suffering can be a mirror, reflecting the values and contradictions of the society around us. And in that mirror, we are forced to see not just the characters on the page, but ourselves. So, the next time you encounter suffering, whether it's your own or someone else's, ask yourself, what is this suffering telling me about the world I live in? What is it showing me about the structures, the systems, the values that shape our lives? Because, just like Dostoevsky's characters, our suffering might be more than just an individual experience. It might be a reflection of something much bigger. In the end, Dostoevsky's exploration of suffering isn't just about pain. It's about understanding the world around us and challenging the systems that contribute to it. Through his characters, he forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and society. So, next time you face hardship, remember, it might just be a reflection of something much deeper. If you found this insight powerful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. Your support helps spread these important ideas, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on how suffering shapes society. Let's keep the conversation going.